In today's video, I'm going to take you into a case from 2004. This is Curios&Spiritual. We'll do a deep dive as we look into the brutal murder of Alistair Wilson. The quiet seaside town of Nairn, situated in the Scottish Highlands, seems to be the epitome of tranquility, with its small population of just over 10,000 people, charming promenades and scenic views. Nairn had long been a peaceful community. Its residents enjoyed a slow pace of life, free from the bustle and chaos of larger urban areas. For Alistair Wilson, his move to Nairn was an opportunity to start a family and build a future. Alistair was a graduate of Heriot-Watt University, where he had earned a degree in business. He had recently been promoted to business manager at the local Bank of Scotland branch in Nairn. Alistair's career was thriving, and his personal life seemed equally promising. He was happily married to Veronica, and together they had 2 young children. Alistair's reputation in the community was one of reliability and respectability. He was not known to have a single enemy. However, in the months leading up to his murder, there was a subtle indications that Alistair had begun to feel uneasy about his surroundings. One of the key factors that would be later scrutinised was his opposition to a planning application by the nearby Havelock Hotel. The hotel owners had submitted plans to build a decking area for outdoor drinking, which Alistair opposed. He felt the plan would disrupt the peace and quiet of the neighbourhood, and he had taken the step of writing a letter to the Highland Council to voice his concerns. Alistair believed it was important to stand up for the interests of his family and of the community. Though this planning dispute seemed to be a minor issue at the time, it would later be suggested as a possible motive for his murder. However, at the time it was hard to imagine that such a small matter could escalate to murder. On the evening of November 28, 2004, it was a typical night for the Wilson family. Veronica was home with their 2 young sons, while Alistair had just returned from his shift at the Bank of Scotland. It was around 7 p.m. when the doorbell rang. Veronica answered the door and she was greeted by a man she did not recognise. The man asked for Alistair by name, and Veronica, somewhat wary of the stranger, called for her husband to come downstairs. The man handed Alistair a blue envelope. Written on the envelope was the name Paul, in bold, block capitals. Alistair was puzzled, as he did not know anyone by that name. After briefly stepping back inside to place the envelope on a nearby table, Alistair turned back to the door, lightly assuming that the man had come to deliver something innocuous. Instead, in a swift and shocking motion, the stranger raised a small caliber pistol and fired 3 shots, 2 into Alistair's head and 1 into his chest. Alistair collapsed to the ground in his own doorway, bleeding profusely. The killer fled without a word, vanishing into the night. Veronica and their 2 young children were left in a state of shock. Their father and husband had been murdered in front of their eyes. Neighbours rushed to the scene, but at the time emergency services arrived, it was clear that Alistair had little chance of survival. He was rushed to hospital in Inverness, where he died from his injuries shortly after. The killer's escape was just as swift as the murder itself. No one reported seeing a vehicle or hearing any suspicious sounds. The weapon used in the crime, a small handgun, was not found at the scene, and there was no immediate clues as to the killer's identity. Following the murder, investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the identity of the killer. Over 6,000 people were interviewed, and more than 500 witness statements were taken. The police combed through Alistair's personal and professional life to look for potential motives, yet every lead seemed to turn cold. The killer was described as stocky, clean-shaven man, aged between 20 to 40, between 5 foot 4 inches and 5 foot 7 inches tall, wearing a dark blouse and jacket and a baseball cap pulled over his eyes. It was initially said that it was thought that Alistair Wilson had known what was in the envelope, which it was said he didn't open. The contents of the envelope were not initially disclosed. However, in November 2017, it was revealed that the envelope had been a blue greeting card style envelope with the word Paul written on it, and it had been empty. The most perplexing aspect of the case was a mysterious blue envelope, Who was Paul? And why had the killer singled out Alistair by name? It was this cryptic clue that kept investigators guessing. Alistair did not know anyone named Paul, and there was no apparent connection to anyone by that name in his life. It was soon after reported that two men had been seen on the East Beach in Nairn, a short walk from Alistair Wilson's home, with a gun, a month before the murder. The murder weapon, a Hennel Saul pocket pistol, was discovered in the storm drain just 10 days after the killing. It was by pure chance the street sweeper checked the drain before cleaning it, nearly getting it sucked up into the truck. It was a small German-made handgun, manufactured in the 1930s, and its origins were traced to Europe. The weapon was an antique, and it was clear it had not been registered in the UK. The unusual nature of the weapon raised further questions. Why would the killer use such an old firearm? Forensic analysts confirmed that the weapon was indeed the one used to kill Alistair. However, the discovery of the gun didn't lead investigators to any solid conclusions. In November 2017, it was stated that 11 Hennel Saul Model 1 guns had been found in the UK. It was said that the fact that 2 of them being found was quite significant, and the World War II links seemed to explain their presence in Nairn. The police said in October 2006 they had traced the man that had supplied the gun, but that the records were very old and they did not go back far enough to show who originally bought it. The lack of forensic evidence linking the killer to the scene left the police with very few avenues to pursue. Despite their best efforts, the case stalled, and for years, the investigation went nowhere. In June 2007, the police carried out DNA testing of about 1,000 men. As the case remained unsolved, various theories began to emerge regarding the motive behind Alistair's murder. One of the earliest and most widely discussed theories was that the murder was a result of a financial dispute. Could Alistair have been targeted by someone with a grudge against him in the banking world? Investigators dug into his professional history, looking for any indication that he had been involved in illicit activities or had encountered a disgruntled customer or colleague. However, no evidence of any financial wrongdoing or conflict surfaced. Another theory that gained traction was the idea that Alistair had been mistaken for someone else. Some speculated that the killer might have had the wrong person in mind, and Alistair may have simply been the case of mistaken identity. However, this theory raised further questions. Why would the killer ask for Alistair by name if he had intended to kill someone else? This led many to believe that Alistair had been targeted, which made the case even more puzzling. Some journalists and amateur sleuths speculated the murder could have been linked to the ongoing planning dispute with the Havelock Hotel. Could the hotel owners or someone connected to the business have sought revenge for Alistair's objections? Police did question the hotel owner, but there was no concrete evidence to link the dispute to Alistair's murder. In later years, a more sinister theory emerged, one involving organised crime. The possibility that Alistair's death was a result of a contract killing was raised. However, no clear evidence of organised crime involvement emerged. The theory remains speculative, though it provided an intriguing avenue for further investigation. In February 2005, to quell the rumour mill that were grabbing at straws, Alistair Wilson's wife denied all involvement in the killing. In 2022, the case was reopened by Police Scotland. The decision to revisit the investigation was largely prompted by the new developments in forensic science, as well as a renewed public interest in the case. Detective Chief Inspector Brian MacArthur was tasked with leading the renewed investigation, and he announced that the police would re-examine all available evidence, including the murder weapon, the blue envelope, and any forensic evidence that had previously been overlooked. The reopening of the case brought new attention to the murder, and in 2024, a new team of investigators were assigned to the case. At a press conference, Assistant Chief Constable Steve Johnson suggested the police now believed more than one person may have been involved in the murder. For the first time, police had a possible suspect, a known local criminal, with a history of dealing offences, who may have played a role in facilitating the crime. However, no arrests were made, and the case remains open. In April 2022, Police Scotland announced that Alistair Wilson's involvement in a local planning dispute around a hotel decking area opposite his house was a likely motive for his murder. They said the hotelier was not a suspect and that the killers were likely customers or builders involved in the construction of the decking area. One of the most poignant aspects of the renewed investigation was the involvement of Alistair's son, Andrew Wilson. Andrew was only 4 years old at the time of his father's murder, has grown up without closure. Now an adult, he has publicly appealed for anyone with information to come forward. His heartfelt pleas for justice have captured the attention of the public and reignited interest in the case. As of today, the case of Alistair Wilson's murder remains unsolved. The blue envelope, the Hen assault pistol, and the name Paul written on the envelope all remain haunting symbols of a crime that has never been fully explained. The Wilson family, especially Alistair's widow Veronica, continue to live with the uncertainty of not knowing who was responsible for Alistair's death or why he was targeted. Though new evidence has been uncovered and the case has been reopened, justice is yet to be served. Theories continue to circulate, but no one knows for certain who killed Alistair Wilson. Was it a random act of violence, or was there a deeper, more personal motive behind his death? The mystery endures, and the question of who killed Alistair Wilson remains one of the most intriguing unsolved cases in Scotland's recent history. Police now believe today the most likely motive, based on what was a current grievance in Alistair's life at the time of his murder, was the fact that he objected in writing about a large decking area that had been built in a pub car park directly opposite from where he lived. Alistair Wilson's objection may have caused inconvenience to those involved in building or using it. Police said you may have a relatively minor matter that results in a conflict and the potential for a level of violence that is totally disproportionate to what happens. These things do happen. Fallouts over objections to car parking, planning permission, that result in conflict. Police have said they were trying to identify who could have been involved in the construction of the original decking in 2004, as well as anyone else who might have visited the Havelock Hotel the weekend of the murder. It was said at the time of Alistair Wilson's objection to the planning permission was openly talked about in the pub. Back in March 2022, a witness was interviewed by police in Canada. It was soon after reported that the age of the murderer, which was initially stated between 20 to 40 years old, could have been as young as 20 years old, and the police revised the suspect's age range. The person that the police interviewed in Canada in March 2022 was said to have been a key witness regarding the planning application. It's a case I've firmly been following since it happened in 2004. I constantly go through it in my mind. Killed over a planning application. It seems insane, but people have died for a whole lot less. Any traction the police do make seem to create more questions than answers. With police in September 2024 doing a complete reinvestigation of the murder. As the case continues to unfold, the search for answers remains ongoing. Alistair Wilson's family, the town of Nairn, and Scotland as a whole hold their breath, hoping that one day the truth may and will finally be revealed.